Let's call this meeting of the Architectural Review Committee to order at 4:02. Erica, could you please do a roll call?
Absolutely. Chair Bluth,
Here.
Vice Chair Hunter,
Present.
Committee Member Carter. Aye. Here. Committee Member Ostavar.
Here.
Committee Member Polly. He's there.
Yeah.
Here. Sorry, I was muted.
Okay. Committee Member Schmidt.
Present.
Committee Member Tregenza.
Here.
And the staff members present are Principal Planner Roveri, Senior Associate Planner Schmidt, I believe he's remote, and myself, Recording Secretary Barrera.
Fantastic. So it looks like we only have the notes on the consent agenda from December 1st and December 15th. Why don't we just, unless somebody has any issues with those notes, we could vote on it just together as just within the consent agenda.
We
But,
need to
are there-
open it up to the public as well.
right. But does, if anybody has any comments and anybody in the public, Erica, maybe you could pass on how the public can join us.
Certainly. Members of the public are encouraged to join our meetings via Zoom Gov, a secure service that connects you live with no lag time. This meeting is also streamed live on youtube.com/City of Monterey. There is a 10-second delay, and Comcast channel 25 with an up to 90-second delay. If you would like to provide public comment, please join the meeting using Zoom or by telephone, making sure to join in time to accommodate delays. To join the Zoom meeting from a computer or phone, use the link or phone numbers on the agenda posted at isearchmonterey.org. Since this meeting has started, you'll find the agenda under the Recent tab. To join by telephone, dial 833-568-8864, then enter the webinar ID. Today's webinar ID is 161-914-9563. If prompted for a participant ID, press pound. Detailed instructions for using Zoom are available at monterey.org/public meetings. To provide public comment via Zoom, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. To provide public comments by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute when called upon. Public commenters will be announced using the last 3 phone number digits or the name typed into Zoom. Public commenters will be muted until it is their turn to speak. Please turn off TV or computer speakers or go to another room while connected, as background noise interferes with the broadcast. Public speakers will be called upon in order of hands raised. Thank you.
Great. Do we have anybody that wants to make any comments on the consent agenda? Okay. Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda, including meeting minutes from December 1st, 2021 and December 15th, 2021.
We have a second?
I'll second.
Great, that's Zoe making the motion and Ed seconding. Can we do a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Chair Bluth,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hunter,
Aye.
Committee Member Carter. Aye. Committee Member Ostavar.
Aye.
Committee Member Polly.
Aye.
Committee Member Schmidt.
Aye as to the December 1st meeting minutes, but abstaining from the December 15th.
Okay. And Committee Member Tregenza.
Aye.
Okay. So the December 1st minutes carry with a vote of 7, and the December 15th minutes carry with a vote of 6.
Right. Do we have anybody that would like to make a comment on items not on the consent agenda?
Not on
see.
the full agenda. So you said not on the consent agenda, but it's not on the full agenda.
Not on the full agenda. Guess seeing none, if anybody does come online, maybe we could ask them, they could join us, but maybe we'll close public comment and move to the first public appearance item, which is 200 Garden Road Architectural Review Application, ARP 008 for a preliminary and final architectural review of the conversion of an existing commercial building into a 34-unit apartment building and a new bicycle storage and waste enclosure accessory structures. Does staff have a presentation?
Yes, thank you, Chair. My name is Chris Schmidt. I'm a senior associate planner with the city, and I've been working with the project applicant and property owner on this project for quite some time. We're excited to get it on the agenda. So just to reiterate, this is an application to convert an existing commercial building to a 34-unit apartment building. Construction of new accessory structures, including bicycle storage structures, waste enclosure, and then a new stairway. And then a density bonus law incentive, which I'll get into a little bit more detail. But first off, the recommendation from staff is to approve the project with conditions. Just a bit of background about the project and the zone. So in 2019, the City Council adopted an ordinance creating the multifamily overlay zone. And this is just on the south side of Garden Road, bound by Garden Road and Highway 68. It allows up to 405 multifamily units total. No units have been permitted to date. And the two projects that we're looking at today would result, if constructed, in a total of 91 units. As part of that new zoning overlay district, there were a number of mitigations, part of the environmental review, including mitigations for air quality, biological resources, tribal cultural resources, hazards and hazardous materials associated with the airport, proximity to the airport, land use and planning, public services, and utilities. And we have a number of conditions of approval for this project and the next associated with these mitigations. So moving on to the project. Again, it's a conversion of an existing commercial building, a 26,000 square foot building, to 34 residential units. 2 would be 1-bedroom units and 32 would be studio units. A new waste enclosure is proposed within the front yard setback. Bicycle storage, two structures for bicycle storage are proposed. A stairway entrance, which it's really an entrance to a side yard patio, and a laundry room expansion are proposed. 20% of the project units are required to be affordable. That's a requirement of the city code. So 7 units would be deed restricted for affordability. And then this applicant is using a new state law that we haven't. I believe we have not brought any project forward using this state law, but the density bonus state law allows cities to grant certain types of incentives and waivers in a trade-off for providing affordable housing units. So in this case, this applicant is asking for one incentive. It's to allow that waste enclosure within the front yard setback, and that trade would be 4 units would be restricted to low income affordability level, and the remaining 3 would be moderate. So getting into the project site, that's a approximately 78,000 square foot site in an existing building and parking lot. Again, it is bound by Garden Road and Way 68. So I have an image of a site plan here, and I highlighted 3 of kind of the main new structures or new features that would be added to the existing site, developed site. So on top, you see a new waste enclosure. Again, that you mentioned is within the 50-foot setback. I'm getting a little feedback. Could I just ask everybody to make sure that they're muted, please? Thank you. And then the next arrow, you see a laundry room expansion. There's an existing stairway that's an exterior stair at this location, so they would be adding floor area at this location, building mass rather. And then lastly, we have this pod of development, which includes bicycle storage and a stairway to the second story. And then the existing pool at that location would be filled to create an outdoor patio to be used by tenants as open space for things like picnics, barbecues, et cetera, et cetera. So here we see the first floor plan. And I will note, actually, I'll go back to the site plan. So as you come, there are two driveway entrances to this site, and as you come in from either one, there's some topography at this site. So as you come in from either one, you're basically coming down, and if you're parking at this northernmost side, you're basically already at the second level. So when I refer to first and second levels, the second level is really at the upper parking grade, which all in all, the entire site is below Garden Road. And I do have some elevations that show that. But so looking at the first floor plan, so this is the lower plan of the two floors. I've highlighted in blue the one bedroom unit. The rest are studio units. You can see that bike storage on the right-hand side, and the stair and chairlift that would be added. I will note that all of the units have the required storage. That storage is required by the city code. There's a specific dimension that's required, and this project meets that requirement. And then here's the second floor. So as I mentioned before, this is actually the entry to the parking lot. People parking at the main entrance level can walk into the building entrance, if you can see my cursor in the middle. Again, we have the other one bedroom unit at the left-hand side corner, and then just below that you can see the laundry room addition. Here is the first elevation I'll show you. It's of the front of the property. And I added this orange line to show the grade of the parking lot, because the architect didn't show that grade on the proposed elevation on the bottom. They're not changing the grade significantly. There will be a little bit of grading of the parking lot there for accessibility reasons, but it's largely going to be the same, at least at where this section was cut. And so you can see that orange line on the bottom showing that grade. And then so you'll see the improvements. They're largely proposing new windows, new paint, some horizontal siding there. Moving on to the rear. So this is the side that faces Highway 68. You can see they'll have to cut the existing concrete building to create new windows here. Again, similar paint scheme and siding. And you can see those new structure additions on the right and left-hand sides. On the west side elevation, so this would be, if you're looking at the site plan, this would be plan left. This goes down towards the additional downhill parking area. So there will be an entrance here. And then the east side elevation. This is the side with the bicycle storage. You can see that image of the existing condition on the right that shows the pool that would be filled, and that patio would be turned to an open space concrete patio. Here is the waste enclosure. It makes way for a number of four-yard waste bin dumpsters, essentially, and then 5 other carts for other recyclables, etc. Here's the lighting plan, and I tried to color code each one, although it's kind of hard to see. the yellow and orange, but you'll see the light poles in the parking lot. That's the white with gray dots. The yellow dots are in on the bottom. You can see the pathway lighting. And then the orange dot are the sconces of the outdoor patio and building entrances. The applicant also provided a landscape plan. There's a diverse number of new plantings proposed, a lot of new trees and ground cover and shrubbery. And I will note that a number of trees were initially proposed, but we did actually propose for removal, but we did actually find a way that they could be preserved. I'll also note that as part of the mitigation for biological resources, we do require biological surveying of properties in the South Garden Road area for these projects. And so 4 San Manzanita plants were discovered on the site, really in an area that's not to be impacted by development. These are species that are listed as just generally vulnerable in the state of California. So these ones will be protected, and we do have conditions of approval that basically requires the construction crews to be educated by a professional biologist, as well as those crews construct protective fencing with the guidance of a biologist. So moving on to the findings for approval. So I guess I should explain a little bit more about density bonus. So the density bonus law really allows cities or jurisdictions to allow up to, I believe it was 4 incentives or deviations from required standards in exchange for a number of a percentage of affordable units depending on the affordability level. And as I mentioned, this project proposes 4 low-income housing units, which is, we rounded up, it's 10% of the project. So it does qualify for a density bonus incentive here. So that's the first finding, is that the project qualifies for the density bonus under density bonus law. The second finding is that the applicant applies for that incentive. The third is that the incentive results in an identifiable, financially sufficient, and actual cost reduction for the development. And in this case, excuse me, locating that enclosure within the front yard setback would result in the 3 of those. And I have a follow-up slide that shows an alternative location, but locations outside of the setback would require grading or retaining walls, potentially relocation of parking and or building masses, and maybe a reduction in unit counts based on the proposed project, which is a conversion of an existing building. The next 2 findings, D has to do with additional incentives that can be granted for mixed use projects. And E has to do with incentives that can be granted for when a child care facility is proposed. So neither of those are applicable here. And then the last is that this approval would not require any other discretionary approval. And in this case, it would not. So the project staff has found that it is eligible for the density bonus incentive, and staff is supportive. And so, yeah, here's the graphic that I was just showing. This shows the proposed waste enclosure location, and then the most likely feasible alternative location, which I show in blue here. And you can see that 50-foot setback line. So generally, anywhere behind that line, the topography issue substantially increases. So it would cost a lot more money to build retaining walls, to do any sort of fill that would be necessary, and any sort of grading of the parking lot there as well. Additionally, staff was looking at whether this structure is going to be just totally visible from the roadway, and it certainly will be, but there is a grade difference between Garden Road and the project driveway here. And then the applicant is also installing landscaping just north of that location. So we felt that this location was acceptable, given that this applicant has chosen this route to see if it could be approved. I think that the enclosure would largely be screened with landscaping over time. Moving on to the architectural review findings. So the first finding is that the proposed siding mass, form, and architectural style are appropriate. This project meets the development standards except for the incentive request, which is allowed. It's generally a conversion of an existing building with some additional floor area and accessory structures that really do not appear oversized or bulky compared to the building, which is relatively massive. The waste enclosure in the front yard setback is sited lower than the street level, so it does not seem overly massive. The new style would be an improved, I called it an industrial residential character, incorporating kind of modern residential elements to this kind of brutal industrial building that I think it works out fairly well. And then additionally, staff made this finding that the design is consistent with CPTED, which is the crime prevention through environmental design, which involves locating things like windows near the parking lot and pathways, having well-lit open space and parking and pathways as well. There are a number of suggested guidelines there. And then it's also compatible with the surrounding area. It would be an improvement in the district. The next finding is that the views, privacy, and living environment are not unreasonably impaired. The site is located downhill from Garden Road. A lot of the construction would really not be noticed from motorists or people walking by along Garden. It's actually kind of hard to see the storage poles besides the waste enclosure. New landscaping would screen the development on both the Garden Road and the Highway 68 side. And then there are no other nearby residential uses in the industrial zone. So there would not be any living environment impairments. The third finding is that the project is consistent with city plans and design guidelines. It is consistent with the development standards and general plan policies. There are a number of general plan policies that state that industrial areas can support multifamily and workforce housing, and that the city should provide incentives for affordable housing projects. And then there's also a policy to provide new landscaping within a 100-foot highway buffer. The last finding is that exterior finish, colored materials, landscaping, lighting, and all other exterior features are appropriate. Staff was able to make this finding. All of these items are modern, high quality, and there's a variety of materials with respect and landscaping and lighting. So I think that staff felt that this was a good design as well. As I mentioned, there are a number of conditions of approval associated with this project that were required as mitigations for the environmental document. The first is that the construction crews will have to water disturbed areas twice a day and limit speeds to 15 miles per hour on haul roads. That's an air quality mitigation. Condition 2 is that any discovery of archaeological materials requires stop work and evaluation by an archaeologist. discovery of human remains requires the county coroner evaluation. And if they are determined to be of Native American descent, the Native American Heritage Council has to be notified, and there are other requirements that the property owner would have to follow in negotiating with any NAHC. The next is that an affordable housing agreement has to be executed between the applicant and the city for those affordable units. The next is that an exterior lighting plan review is required, review to be done by the airport manager. The next is that the sewer capacity must be confirmed before building permits are issued. Fire protection to the fire chief standard is required. Stormwater and post-construction requirements are applicable. The project biologist will conduct an employee education program and require and oversee installation of fencing around the sand manzanita, as I mentioned before. Any sewer laterals that would be abandoned for this project would have to be removed. Easements would have to be recorded for sewer and storm drain systems so they can be accessed by the city. Deed restrictions that would require the owner to notify occupants that the airport is nearby and it has a lot of noise generation, and then also requires the applicable noise insulation for the units. And lastly, is the requirement that an aviation and hazard easement is required to be recorded and granted to the airport district. So that concludes my presentation. Please let me know if you have any questions. Again, staff's recommendation is to approve the project. The applicant is here, I believe. The owner and their whole development team is also available for questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Does the community have any questions for Chris?
I have several.
Okay, so go for it.
The first one I have is there was no mention of water in this report, and that's concerning to me. I know that there was a request made to have an exemption to condition 2 and redo the zoning on the water, and I'm wondering whatever came of that. And I guess I'll let you answer that first, and then I'll continue.
Yeah, so the project has water for the number of units proposed. We've been looking at this site for 2 years now to develop it, and I think the initial proposal was, I believe, and the applicant can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was 72 units, and they had requested that additional water, and it's my understanding they did not receive it.
So the zoning exemption was approved for it to go from industrial to residential?
It allows one or the other.
Okay. My second question is, I know there were at some point there were noise contours that were taken of that area. Has there been any discussion of what that would look like? I think you mentioned that they have to do, it's really weird that you're not sitting in front of me, that you have to do certain insulation to protect from the airport noise.
Yeah, there is a condition of approval that requires specific noise insulation standards in order to mitigate the airport noise hazard, rather. I would probably defer to Fernanda. She prepared the environmental document, and I think the applicant may have a better answer if that doesn't answer your question.
Okay. I think this is a huge update to where that building is. I think that's really exciting and awesome. And I also want to ask if when people will move in there, is there conversation about transportation and public transportation options and what that would look like? Because as far as I can tell, the parking is not, it's more suggested that you have a bike, but it's hard in that area particularly.
So this project is using the existing parking lot, which has well over the requirement. I believe there are 60 spaces and I think the requirement is 34. That being said, they are proposing bike storage as well. I don't know the status of providing a new bus service there. I think I was briefly part of discussions with MST about that, but I'm not sure that there are any solid plans moving forward.
Okay, I think this is really exciting. So thanks for making this happen.
Any other committee comments?
Chris, I have a question. Are they going to be using, I live about 2 miles away from this, and I used to work on Garden Road, so I drive by that. So it is definitely, that building's been an eyesore for the last couple of years. But I am wondering, are they going to be utilizing the existing entrance for the second story, which is actually the ground level story? There is an existing entrance there with where you have to cross like a little bridge. Are they going to be using that for the entrance of the building?
Yes. Yeah, that will still be the main entrance. And I think that there's also a side entrance on the side portion of the parking lot.
I'd like to clarify one of Chris's answers about water availability. So there's a condition in the water district regulations that regarding conversion from industrial to residential, or basically a change of use. And that still needs to clear the water district in order for this project to receive a building permit. And then the site is still subject to the water that is available to the site currently. So they would not be able to install any new water meters.
So what's available currently is what's being proposed.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Fernando.
Any other committee members want to have a question for Chris?
I have one more. What parameters are going to be used for low income and deed restricted?
Can you clarify your question? I'm not sure what you're asking.
What parameters for, what numbers do you use to qualify someone for low income housing?
I don't know if, I'm sorry, I don't know if we use the county's specific numbers. I would defer to Fernanda, but we basically coordinate with our housing division that specifically works on these types of things. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
That's fine.
So affordability levels are defined in our code. They need to follow a certain, I believe it's the housing health code, something like that, but it's defined in our code and it follows the state guidelines.
I can provide just a little bit of clarification. My name is Kimberly Cole. I'm the Community Development Director. So the city's affordable housing ordinance requires 20% of the on-site housing to be permanently deed restricted for affordable housing. So that's in perpetuity. Of that 20%, 10% will be for low income and 10% for moderate income. We use the federally adopted standards that are also sort of used at the state level. And so low income is between 50 and 80% of the county median, and between 81% and 120% of the county median is defined as moderate income. And the actual income rates for that are updated annually by HUD. So they do slightly increase each year, both the eligibility by household size as well as the eligible rental rate.
Thank you.
I had a couple more clarifying questions. Generally, really pleased to see how much effort staff has been working with applicants on these projects. That's really nice to see. I had some other kind of questions about context. Generally not seeing a lot of context in these presentations as far as follow-up questions regarding kind of cycle paths or something. I was pleased to see all these bicycles there. So I'm curious if there is any connectivity for bicycles there. That's one question. Just a question about tree protection. Are they being held to protecting these trees through some sort of tree protection plan? You mentioned there was a number of trees being saved. I didn't see, maybe it was written somewhere, just a number of trees that are being removed. I was curious about that. And then lastly, just there was just kind of mention of a patio, but I didn't see any drawings or anything suggesting what would be happening on that patio. That's it.
Great, yeah, so I think that there were really preliminary talks associated with this project about bicycle connectivity. We don't have any set plans for a new bike lane or anything with that regard. As far as trees go, no trees are proposed for removal. There were some that were proposed to be removed to create new parking spaces, but I think that those were just initially remnants from the original project, which was going to essentially be twice the number of units and therefore require additional parking. And so we had those additional spaces removed. And I'm sorry, what was your last question?
I saw there's a patio mentioned, but I didn't see any drawings or kind of what was proposed to happen on that patio. I saw the pools being removed, but kind of no clarity on what was really happening there.
Yeah, sorry. So the patio would be the location of the pool. It would just be used for open space purposes. I think that I talked to the applicant about putting things like picnic tables and allowing tenants to have a group barbecue or barbecue location, et cetera, there.
Okay, yeah, that seems appropriate, especially knowing that maybe there aren't as many public amenities like parks nearby and things like that. Making sure there's outdoor uses for the users seems like appropriate. So thank you.
I'd like to add that there is a bike lane on Garden Road currently. And the vision is that people who live on Garden Road would use that bike lane, would eventually connect to our North Fremont median bike lanes and access grocery stores and other services that way. And the requirement to provide bicycle storage is to encourage that bicycle use and bicycle connectivity.
Great, thank you. Sorry, did you mention tree protection? Is there the applicant being held to tree protection in any significant manner?
Yeah, so the city's tree protection standards do apply. I think, just for a further layer of protection, we can add that as a condition of approval that the protection standards apply as well.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Is the applicant going to make a presentation? If we have questions about the building, should we be directing them to the design team now, or are they going to make a presentation?
I think they'll make a presentation. We'll just ask if they want to once Chris is done with his.
Okay.
Any further questions for Chris? Okay, so thanks, Chris. That was fantastic. Can we, does the applicant have a presentation?
You're right. Is it already on? There's a green. Good. Okay. This is my first public hearing in a couple of years, so I'm glad to be here with you today.
Welcome back.
Chair and members of the commission, Paul Davis, architect. And we've been, like Chris said, I think it's been longer than we submitted to the some potential project ideas about 2 years ago, but we've been working with Brad for a lot longer than that. in terms of how to be able to adapt this building that is a combination of concrete walls and wood framing, large spaces inside. So we're able to fill in the racquetball courts to develop a full second floor or top floor, and then try to find ways to be able to, at least on the east and west end, fix a lot of the little tack-ons that have been added over the past decades, and then try to give it some type of an aesthetic that will soften it. And we studied several different color schemes, and the idea is to still try to use color on the larger masses that hopefully will just make it it won't disappear, but you just won't see all the nooks and crannies that maybe are occurring, and then adding another material that can just soften the building facade up. The big issue on this property is the topography of the site, and so what we're doing is the top floor is the floor that will be accessible and we'll have all the units will be adaptable on that floor. And so then we need to have accessible parking spaces to that floor. And then they also have to be able to get out to the trash enclosure. And really that existing bridge is the way that we enter that project. And that's how any tenants that have disabilities will be able to park and enter, and also go out and be able to empty their trash. Even the driveway itself that parallels the building and Garden Road has a lot of a mixture of soft and severe slopes into it. So this middle section where the entry is and the parking is and the trash enclosure is located is where we can provide those accessible routes of travel. What we did with the trash enclosure, it wasn't this big, but now with the new state regulations, it got a little bit longer as we went through the city DRC process. But we would have solid walls on all three edges, so you wouldn't have a 6-foot high wall and a suspended roof above. So if you were driving or walking along Garden Road, you could see down into it. So we want to be able to shield the contents of that trash enclosure from the public way, since we're asking to have it in the front setback. Let me see, there was a couple of other questions. According to the building code, we have to provide soundproofing measures that limits the noise levels in the apartments to a maximum of 45 decibels. So that's not only Plains, it's also Highway 68. And so that will be part of the process, and when we go through the building department for our building permit. I think I wanted to try to answer some of the other questions. I think I did. Otherwise, I'm open here for I'm open for any questions from the commission members.
Thanks, Paul. Justin, you had some questions. Do you want to start off with yours?
Yeah. Sure, I'm not muted, am I? No.
No, you're
We
up.
can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Paul. There's a lot of really neat things going on here. I'm actually surprised that the building's not being torn down, because it's looking pretty sorry right now. That building is in pretty rough shape. The color scheme that you've chosen is just, it's right on. I mean, kudos to you guys on that. And I really appreciate the way you've sort of added a little bit of materiality with the wood detailing and the slats and things like that. I'm glad you didn't try to superimpose some historical architectural style on this building. You know, it is what it is. It's a modern building, and you've given it a bit more definition. I think it looks pretty sharp. I'm not super crazy. I'll be honest with you, I'm not crazy about that garbage location. But it sounds like it's been studied. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it. It's sort of, you walk out the front door and you're looking across the parking lot at a garbage enclosure, and sure, it's got a roof on it, but you're gonna, it's a very in-your-face location, and it seems like there's other parts in the site. Having looked at this for a couple, not extensively, as extensively as you have, it seems like there might be some other places to put that, but I guess we'll just trust that you've got it where you've got to have it. On the back of the building, there's these, I've noticed it often driving down Highway 68, that there's these sort of recessed concrete panels on the facade of the building. And I noticed that the windows that you've installed and cut into that, those are concrete, if I understand correctly, Paul?
Those walls where the windows will be put in are concrete, correct?
Yeah.
So,
is any effort made to sort of relate those windows a little better to those concrete panels? Because I think you run the risk of having those look pretty haphazard on that elevation and sort of like an afterthought.
Yeah, we're with the spacing of party walls and things. We definitely, we can look at if we could. I'm sorry about this. Definitely, we could take another look at each unit to see where we can slide a window one way or another to make that happen. Those windows, when we cut the holes in the concrete walls, there'll be a steel frame that will have to be installed.
Mm-hmm.
So then we'll have to detail that transition of the frame and how we can get some type of a really flat trim, and I don't know if it'll be with aluminum or wood to cover that frame and tie into those panels. But we're squeezing in these studios, but we have the length of the studio wall, exterior wall, to be able to have that window adjust.
Yeah, and I know you got a lot of things to deal with there. You've got the egress issues, and you've got a module that you're working on the layout. But
nope.
Yeah, I think if you can take another look at that might benefit the building there to have those windows relate to the existing paneling, because it's going to be a lot of work to put them in. The only other comment I have, Paul, did you guys do the landscape plan in-house?
No.
No? Okay.
Landscape designer worked on that.
Okay. And I think this ties into what Committee Member Ostabar was mentioning earlier in his questions to staff. These buildings aren't really walking distance to parks or things like that, and I realize that they're studio apartments, and by and large we're not going to have families and things living in these places, but I think a little bit of thought to those outdoor spaces and how this site plan gets animated and landscaped, and viewing the site as more than just the place for the building, and how these outdoor spaces could be used, and how not only could they be used, but how could they be sort of nice spaces. And I know it's a tough environment out there. You're sort of shoehorned between a highway and an airport. Let's be honest, it's a difficult program, but by and large, the people living out there are going to get in their cars to go to things like parks and restaurants and picnics and things like that. So I think as much thought as you could give these projects to the animation of these outdoor spaces and the long-term use of them, I think they really could benefit from that, because I see the topography, and I know I'm well aware of the challenges, but there's opportunities there too. And hopefully as this gets developed, you guys can dial those spaces in a little bit and make that more of an amenity for the people that are occupying these apartments.
The goal, at least along 68, was to try to build up the tree population, just to be able to help with noise, or just separation in the future when the trees can go. we have the ability to meander a path down there and around to them and then get up onto that patio. We haven't spent the time on the patio yet to develop it with Brad, and we'll be doing that.
So that's all I've got.
Just a reminder to keep it to just questions at this time.
Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't meander into commentary there. I realize that.
Sure.
Any other questions for Paul from the committee?
Yeah, this is Patrick Tregenza. Thanks, Paul. I'm just looking at the proposed elevations, and they don't have really any landscaping in them. And is that just because that overlay wasn't available for the lower like ground elevation, or there is, I know there's an overall view from above, but it just looks like there's just not a lot of planting going on. Like there's nothing on the west elevation. There's 2 trees on the east elevation. And so I just, kind of am going back to what Justin was talking about, opportunity to kind of soften this with some trees and shrubs and stuff like that. So is there more planting that I'm not seeing on these elevations?
Well, we didn't put the planting on the elevations. We just have the landscape plan that was provided by the landscape designer, and that didn't really come in a small scale. You really don't see all that may be on that plan. Also, at this point, it's a design level plan, and then all of that will be detailed out more fully with irrigation system design and everything for the building department.
That answered my question. Thank you.
Any further committee questions? Okay, then why don't we move to any public comment? Erica, could you pass on again how the public can get in touch with us?
Sure. Once again, to join the meeting from a computer or phone, use the link or phone numbers on the agenda posted at isearchmonterey.org. To join by telephone, dial 833-568-8864, then enter the webinar ID. Today's webinar ID is 161-914-9563. To provide public comment via Zoom, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. To provide comments by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute when called upon. Public commenters will be announced using their last 3 phone number digits or the name typed into Zoom. I currently see one attendee, but their hand is not raised.
Thanks, Erica. If the person wants to make a comment, they can do so when they have an opportunity. Why don't we close public comment unless that person comes back, and open for committee comments? Are there any committee comments?
I'm really excited to see this building get upgraded and see this happen. So great work. I noticed that there's one description saying tiki torch, a tiki torch color, and I thought that was a cool little detail.
Yeah, I just follow up on a few other items and comments we talked about. So I would like to see, just make sure there is a tree protection plan included as part of this. I mean, there's all this effort was made to preserve some trees. Let's make sure they don't just get destroyed during construction. I also agree. I think it was Justin mentioning something about the trash enclosure. If it sounded like we have double the amount of parking that's required, it would seem that perhaps we could land that in a couple parking spots that are less out to the front. So I guess that's a bit of a question as well. How was that looked at? I saw in this alternate location that was reviewed, but maybe there's one that's not up front and center, even if it is still in the setback. And then lastly, following up with those comments about making at least a path and some sort of way of appreciating the exterior space. I very much appreciate this adaptive reuse and our need for housing, and just I think with some minor adjustments like that, it's possible to make it really a wonderful place for people to live. That's all my comments.
Any other comments?
Yeah, this is Justin, and I think my comments pretty much came through in my questions, and I'll do a better job on the next project of sticking to questions, but just reiterate, and you know, I should say I didn't mention this in the question, the trash enclosure location, yeah, I don't like it. I really didn't like the alternate location either. It was right up against the windows of the building. It was worse than the current location. So, you know, I do agree if there is this excess of parking, you know, and maybe it will require a retaining wall or two, but someone maybe take a second look at that and just reiterate that comment about the outdoor spaces, and not necessarily just a path, but literally a place on the site for people to congregate, and just a little bit more definition on that patio. And I think that'll all come in time, but those are pretty important points. And of course, the windows, I think you guys should look. I know it's very, it's easy to draw on a two-dimensional elevation. But my guess is those windows could end up looking pretty rough once they get cut into concrete and installed. And, you know, the more you can relate those to that paneling, or maybe even you decide to stucco that concrete so that you're not relating them to that paneling and don't even have to deal with that relationship anymore. I would encourage some thought to be given to that. But by and large, I think that the direction of the project is, it's nice to see. That's all I've got.
I've watched this building slowly go into disrepair over the last couple of years. I'm like Zoe, I'm very excited to see the end result. I was a little concerned about the trash, the waste area being up front. However, being familiar with that site, I did attend physical therapy in that building, so I'm kind of familiar with the various parking areas. I know the building kind of, the plot, the parcel slopes towards the back. So if the idea is to have handicap accessible, or the top floor, which is the ground level floor, be more accessible for people who might have some kind of physical disability. The explanation of the trash enclosure being kind of in that general area makes more sense to me, because I do know that the side of the building slopes back on both sides. So, and I think if it's closer to the building, if I remember correctly, it might even be more visible from the street level as you're driving by than where it is located now. Based upon me driving past that building twice a day, 4 times a day, the past 2 years. So I'm excited to see it. Like I said, it's slowly been deteriorating and it's just become an eyesore. I've been concerned about some of the other issues with vacant buildings in that area, and I think this is going to help resolve some of them in more ways than one. And so I'm excited to see what happens.
So I'm just wondering, Fernanda, I guess there's 2 major issues that are coming up in the comments. There's tree protection and then the trash location. How should we address those? Should we try to put it into a motion that will then have conditions that relate to those 2 issues?
Yes, you could do that. The city has standard tree protection measures for construction projects. So you could request that those be included as a condition of approval. And for the trash enclosure, if you can word it in a way that it could be also a condition, that you can go ahead.
I'm not sure how we word it that would provide a specific solution. It didn't seem like it was a general concern of where the trash location is. There was not a specific solution that could be implemented.
Yeah, I can clarify at least for myself on each of these topics that I brought up. If they are listed as a condition, I do feel like I could trust. It sounds like the process will still be, Chris will still be involved in this process. If our concerns are listed and planning follows up with these with the applicant, I feel fairly confident that our concerns will be managed properly. That's
I've got a follow-up question on that as well. Is this project go into construction documents after this, or does it go to the planning commission? Well, what's the next step on the path for this project, Chris?
Construction documents. And I was just going to suggest regarding the tree protection that the ARC could request a condition that the applicant adds the tree protection standards to the construction document plans. They'd be copied onto a sheet on there. That would be one condition that I might suggest. The other, it's almost like a non-binding condition, but it would be something to the effect of explore alternative locations or ways to reduce the visual impact of the waste enclosure at its proposed location. Either, again, alternative location or ways to further screen it or reduce it, how it's visible from the street.
So before you, though, is a density bonus incentive request to locate the trash enclosure in the front yard setback. So you would have to include that, whether you would like to approve or deny that request in your motion. And then, as Chris suggested, a motion could also be made to have a condition that staff work with the applicant on an alternative trash enclosure location. However, that incentive needs, a decision needs to be made on that incentive tonight.
Fernanda, if we approve it, if we basically approve that incentive, it doesn't preclude the applicant from pulling it out of the setback at a later date, does it?
That's right. So if you
Okay.
approve it, the applicant may locate the trash enclosure in the front yard setback, or he may decide to put it in a location outside of the setback.
Okay.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah, for me, it was more just, I think as Justin said, it seemed to me as a user, it seemed it was in alignment with your entry and exit door. Is that correct? So that seemed a little odd to me. It could even shift either way, might be preferable. Not having the opportunity to study that really thoroughly. Again, I feel like I trust the applicant to work with the city to get that right. I also agreed with what Shelley's comment. I think it might be that it is less visible, closer to the road. So I appreciate all those things. I think it's more of a user experience and making sure it's just well thought out.
Fernando, before we move to a motion and a vote, is it okay for Paul to maybe respond to the issues with regard to the trash location?
Sure, you can call him back.
Paul, could you come back, please, and maybe join in on the discussion?
Sure.
That issue.
Thank you for the opportunity. You can even see in the trash enclosure detail that we presented to you, the slopes are so severe from the east to the east of this and to the west of this, that the trash enclosure actually steps up that grade. So that first part of the trash enclosure will have to contain all the containers for somebody with a disability. But if we were to move this and shift this, it means that we would have more severe slopes for a path of travel to get to it. We know, we understand, and we'll try to illustrate that to the staff, and also if there is another location that we can find, we'll vet that as much as possible. But Justin was correct that in the location that staff had identified, that would be about, that would be an 18-foot tall retaining wall at the back wall of that trash enclosure for those occupants in those units to look at right outside their windows. So we did spend a lot of time. The grade slopes down to this area where the entrance is, and it's the location that makes sense in terms of path of travel. But
Thanks, Paul.
we'll still meet with staff and just see if we can squeeze out something else.
Great, thank you very much. Well, why don't we, does anybody want to attempt to put together a motion?
I'll give it a shot.
Okay, thank you, Zoe.
I'm going to move to approve 2000 Garden Road Architecture Review Application ARP-20-0088 for preliminary and final architecture review of the conversion of an existing commercial building to a 34-unit apartment building, new bicycle storage and waste enclosure accessory structures, and one density bonus law incentive to allow waste enclosure in the front yard setback, including conditions of approval set by staff as well as tree protection. Is that right?
You could say add tree protection, city's tree protection plan.
And in conditions of approval, include the city's tree protection plan.
And anything about the trash?
I think Chris said the trash enclosure. I don't think we needed to make a condition of approval for that, did we? Justin?
I thought we were going to request that the applicant study with staff an alternate location, but we're not going to bind them.
Okay,
That we're going to approve the current location, but, formalize the request that the applicant continue that dialogue with staff.
Correct.
okay. So does that need to be a condition of approval,
Yes, I think so.
Fernando?
So are you approving the location?
Yeah, we would approve the current location, but request, it's not binding, but we're requesting them to take a second look at this and work with staff to make sure that they've explored all the options of this current enclosure.
Okay, so conditions need to be specific.
Right.
So if you're just making a recommendation that the applicant work with staff on an alternative location, that's not really a condition.
Okay, then we don't put it in the approval and, hey, Paul, give us your Scout's honor.
You could say meet with staff one more time. Is that specific enough? We know that maybe you've already met with staff a lot. And this could be the result. It's just making that request. I do appreciate Paul's description. It does sound like it's kind of hemmed in by these grades, but it's just, we want to ask that question, that it's been fully vetted by staff.
So could we say a condition of approval for the trash enclosure to be fully vetted by city staff?
It basically already has, I guess, so that it is a question.
Yeah, I think what Fernando's saying is we either have to approve it or not approve it.
Yeah,
And we're trying to walk a line, but like approving it, but I think we just have to approve it.
I think we have to
And,
approve it.
yeah, we have to approve it. And I don't want to hold the whole project up, but, Paul, take a look at it. And it'd be nice, Fernando, if they came back, could we put a condition in there that says if they come back with an alternate location, it doesn't need to go back? How would that get handled? Are they going to get kicked back to the ARC if they relocate this thing, or can we rely on staff to approve it?
Can rely on staff to approve an alternative location.
Okay.
So staff would be making, if the alternative location it's substantially different, staff would be making the ARC findings for you.
Yeah, Justin, I'm not sure I actually feel comfortable with that. I'd rather just approve this because who knows, right? I mean, it's part, if it ends up somewhere that seems like somebody says it's better, but we're actually don't agree.
Yeah.
So I feel fairly convinced at this point that Chris and Paul have given us reason for where it's located. I agree with our initial concerns, but it does seem like they've come back with fairly substantial answers as to why it's where it is.
Okay, so we can leave the condition for approval for the enclosure out.
Mhm.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, I think it's just a tree. I mean, the trees.
The tree protection. Okay. Can you repeat that back?
I would like you to clarify, because I have including conditions of approval set by staff and city's tree protection program.
Correct.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay, do we have a second?
Quick question is there was some discussion between myself and Justin at least about outdoor space. I mean, in other cities I've worked with, that's actually a pretty substantial requirement. I know we're a little more lenient in that, but it sounds like, again, that's because they didn't provide any drawings for that we can't really hold them to something because they didn't provide drawings. Are we then saying, please do this? How are we holding them accountable without drawings that show that request?
I would recommend that you have a specific condition that maybe says, the open space path is extended in this direction, or these facilities or amenities are required within the patio area, or something to that effect. Even if they haven't shown it, I think if you can generally describe it, we can work with them on it.
Well, I don't think we want to start designing the outdoor spaces with conditions of approval. I think at some point we need to have a conversation with staff about requiring landscape plans and getting this stuff before the ARC meeting, because it's important.
I agree. Also some more context, but in general, this does seem like a really fantastic project. I'm really excited to see it move ahead. But these concerns are valid.
Well, Fernanda, I think the two options are we can go with the motion that Zoe has, or we can ask them to come back. Are those the only two options we really have?
Sorry, I'm not clear on the concern about open space. So
It's not open space, it's just the lack of definition on the outdoor spaces.
oh,
They didn't provide plans, right? And that is a condition typically to have these plans complete before it comes across our desk. And it sounds like there's going to be a patio, there's going to be some consideration for that, but technically we haven't seen them, so we don't know if that's really happening or not.
Chris,
I'll just clarify that there was a landscape plan. It may have not been as specific as maybe the ARC desires, but we do have a landscape plan.
Correct. I did.
Diagrammatic.
Yeah, I did see the plan. I did see quite a number of trees and things like that. They looked like a good plan with just the list of native plants and things. That was great to see. But again, I didn't see definition for the use of people.
so a condition could be added that at the building permit stage, the outdoor open space area be delineated in the plan. Would that help?
How do you feel about that?
I think that's fine, but what would that look like? Would they come back to us with just that plan?
Also, the landscape plan could come back for your approval at a later date.
Would the landscape plan include the outdoor space?
It should.
it could be part of your motion.
We could motion to approve as far as Zoe's current motion stands, and then add that the applicant will have to come back with a more detailed outdoor space plan to include pathways and details on the patio.
I think we can just say a condition of approval is a complete landscape plan. A complete landscape plan will have like the hardscapes defined, will have a broader planting scheme, where grasses are going, where trees are going, where shrubs are going. It's a standard condition of approval on, Monterey County applications and things like that. So I think we add a condition that says applicant will provide a completed landscape plan prior to the issuance of a building permit.
So could you add to that motion or to that condition, who would review the plan? So would you like it to come back to you, or would you be comfortable with staff reviewing it?
I thought it was a requirement that the plans that we review are more complete in that regard. That's when I was onboarded. I thought I remembered seeing something like that. So I believe that should be a requirement. If they just come back for just that portion, great. But I thought it was a requirement before coming to our committee.
So if we add a condition of approval to say a full and complete landscape plan will come back to the ARC for approval?
Yeah, it doesn't need to be CD level. It can just be concept plan. That would be acceptable. Correct.
Okay. Is that
So-
okay, Fernanda?
Yes, so you were saying prior to building permit issuance, a landscape plan with open space areas and amenities shall come back to the ARC?
Does that sound good?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Erica, can you add that?
So I have including conditions of approval set by staff and city's tree protection program, and prior to building permit issuance, a full and complete landscape plan will come back to ARC for approval.
Does that sound good? Okay.
Fantastic. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Erica, could you do a roll call, please?
Chair Bluth,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hunter,
Aye.
Committee Member Carter.
Aye.
Committee Member Ostavar,
Aye.
Committee Member Polly,
Aye.
Committee Member Schmidt,
Aye.
and Committee Member Tregenza.
Aye.
Okay, this motion carries with a vote of 7. The decision is appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 days. We have applications in the planning office, and they can also be found online.
Thank you. And thank you, Paul. I think this is a great start for Garden Road, and I'm very happy to see you pursuing it. And I'll look forward to seeing you back with the additional information that the committee's requested. But congratulations, and hopefully we're making progress, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you all.
So let's move to the second public appearance item, which is consider 2600 Garden Road Architectural Review Application ARP-20-0097 for preliminary and final architectural review of 5 new 3-story multifamily residential buildings and accessory structures, tree removal application ART-22-002. Does staff have a presentation?
Yes, thank you, Chair. My name is Fernanda Roveri, Principal Planner for the City of Monterey. So as you mentioned, Chair, this is for 2600 Garden Road. 5 new 3-story multifamily residential buildings and accessory structures, tree removals, a reasonable accommodation request, and 2 density bonus law incentives. The recommendation is that the ARC adopt the resolution approving the project with the conditions listed in the resolution. As Chris mentioned, this area has a multifamily overlay zoning, which was created in 2019, which allows up to 405 multifamily units to be located at lots south of Garden Road. And no units have been permitted to date. So the proposal here is for a total of 57 units at 2600 Garden Road. The document that approved the Garden Road multifamily overlay was an initial study with a mitigated negative declaration pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act. And that was adopted by City Council, like I said, in 2019. And the mitigation measures that were identified as part of that environmental document included the following. And I just wanted to point out that there was a subsequent review for this project because it was more project specific than the original environmental document. The original environmental document was for to allow residential units to be located in this area, but none of the projects had been envisioned at that time. So here before you today, we have a project-specific proposal. And so we had to update the environmental document or update the environmental findings to make them project-specific. And so in Exhibit B of the resolution, there was an air quality report prepared, a biological assessment prepared, and a vehicle miles traveled analysis prepared for this project. So those are in order to support a CEQA exemption for this project, which is in your resolution. So this project is for 5 new 3-story buildings. A mix of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units are proposed. And like Chris mentioned, our city code requires 20% affordability. So that would mean that 12 of the units would be affordable rental units and deed restricted. The proposal includes accessory structures, 2 waste enclosures in the parking lot area, and 1 porte cochere, which is a canopy for vehicles. And a density bonus law, 2 density bonus law incentives, one of them being a building height increase from 35 feet to 38 feet 8 inches for all buildings, and a building spacing reduction from 30 feet, which is required by our zoning ordinance, to 20 feet for all buildings. And the reasonable accommodation request to locate the porte cochere within the front yard setback. The project site is on the south side of Garden Road, as you can see here. It has 150,899 square feet. There are existing hexagon-shaped buildings, trees, and the parking lot. The proposed site plan follows that same parking lot configuration. However, it proposes to demolish all existing buildings in order to make room for the 5 new multifamily buildings. The waste enclosures are on either side of the parking lot, as you can see on this photo. And the porte cochere is proposed to be placed front and center and closest to Garden Road. This is a proposed building elevation example. It shows the 3 levels of the building and some of the materials and colors. And these are proposed building elevations that show all 5 buildings. from the northwest and south elevations. And the middle drawing shows the porte cochere in front of the first building. And I would also like to point out the grade difference. So the grade slopes down as you get farther away from Garden Road. And this is just the rendering of the proposed porte cochere, which would match the building's architectural style and materials. The proposed lighting is similar to the 2000 Garden Road project. It's mainly pedestrian lighting to light the paths, pedestrian paths of travel within the site, and also building lighting for safety, as well as parking lot lighting for safety as well. The proposal includes tree removals, and so a tree replanting plan was submitted. The trees that are shaded are the proposed trees to be planted. They are all proposed to be coast live oaks of a 24-inch box size and a total of 26. And they are proposed to be scattered around the site. The proposed building height is 38 feet 8 inches, as mentioned. And one of the density bonus incentives is a request to increase the maximum building height of 35 feet to allow this extra height for the buildings. And so a topographic survey was prepared for the site, and it shows that the most restrictive grade for this example would be 245 feet. And it shows that the top of the roof at 283 feet. So that's a difference of 38 feet in this example. The proposed building spacing is 20 feet. And this was the second density bonus incentive requested. Our code requires 30 feet of spacing between buildings, but this is not a building code requirement. It is a zoning ordinance requirement. 20 feet would still provide for the required building code spacing and for light, air, and fire safety. The findings that the ARC needs to consider are as follows. For the density bonus incentives, it's the same findings that Chris presented to you. The project qualifies for a density bonus because it is proposing 20% affordability. The applicant applied for the incentive as shown in Exhibit A. The 38-foot 8-inch height and 20-foot spacing would result in identifiable, financially sufficient, and actual cost reductions for the housing development. The extra 3 feet 8 inches of height would allow the buildings to have sloped roofs, and sloped roofs are much more efficient and cost efficient and easier to keep than flat roofs. Also, the forested nature of the site means that there will be tree debris falling on top of the buildings, and flat roofs would trap that debris. And so the applicant wanted to provide sloped roofs for easier maintenance. With a 3-story building, there is very limited space between floors to accommodate the required ventilation systems and other mechanical ductwork. And so there's very limited space And the ceiling heights are proposed to be 8 feet. And so there wasn't much room to work with. And so the applicant is proposing this extra height in order to be able to construct these affordable units. For the 20-foot spacing, the buildings are proposed to be located in roughly the same footprint as the existing buildings. And the 20-foot spacing would allow them to be placed closer together and closer to the front of the site, which would minimize the grading. The 30-foot spacing would push the buildings back toward the back of the site. And this would have increased the cost, the grading costs and the tree removals. And that explanation was also made by the applicant as part of Exhibit A. The project does not propose mixed use or a child care facility, so those are not applicable here. And granting the incentives would not require any other discretionary approval. So that finding is met. These are the findings for reasonable accommodation. And there's a state law that requires cities to accommodate, to basically deviate from zoning standards and other standards in order to accommodate people with disabilities who are seeking equal housing opportunities. And so the number one finding is that will these units accommodate, and the port cochere accommodate people with disabilities? And the answer is yes, because these are adaptable ground floor units. And the port cochere would provide ADA accessible and a covered waiting area for people with disabilities. Without the port cochere, housing opportunities would be diminished for these people. The intent is to allow for a covered area for people to wait while they wait for a ride-hailing service. The request would not impose a burden on the city, and it would not require a fundamental alteration in the nature of a city program or law. And the port cochere's location within the front yard setback would make the ground floor units viable housing alternatives for people with disabilities. And these are the findings for architectural review. The proposed siding, form, mass, and architectural style are appropriate because the proposal meets development standards with the density incentives. The buildings have large setbacks from the front and sides, and there's adequate building spacing as demonstrated in the site plan. There's a variation in the plane of each facade, and which breaks up the vertical mass. The repeated balcony elements and horizontal coursing create an interesting facade, and the repeated windows also break up the vertical mass. The architectural style is appropriate for multifamily residential construction. The colors are earth tones, and the materials are they're commonly found in Monterey, such as wood, the wood balconies, the mission tile roofing, and the plastered cement. The accessory structures would match the architectural style of the building. The views, privacy, and living environment would not be unreasonably impaired because there are no public views over the project site, and there is a substantial distance between properties and the setbacks are also significant. The project is consistent with city plans and design guidelines. It's consistent with development standards, with the exception of the incentives requested. And consistent with general plan policies, because industrial areas such as Garden Road can support multifamily housing. And the housing element, with the goal of the housing element is to provide incentives for affordable housing projects. The project is also consistent with the crime prevention through environmental design principles, because the lighting plan is pedestrian level lighting, and it's meant to focus the lighting on the subject, not create any long shadows. The forested nature of the site also creates a welcoming environment, and trees, basically trees prevent crime in general. The exterior finish, colors and materials, landscaping, lighting, and all other exterior features are appropriate. Like I mentioned, the earth tone colors and mission barrel roof tiles are appropriate. And the replacement tree plan follows the proposal from the arborist illustrated in Exhibit A. And the lighting is pedestrian level, and it's appropriate because it also acts as safety lighting. The tree removal finding is that the 65 trees would prevent reasonable development of the permitted uses. The siting of the proposed buildings is reasonable because they would be roughly placed in the same building footprint as the existing buildings, but they would be placed closer together, which would reduce the number of tree removals. The applicant is also proposing to save most of the trees in the middle of the site. And this site is similar to other sites along the south side of Garden Road, because most sites are developed with large buildings and large parking lots and have similar topographic and vegetation characteristics. And so it's reasonable to allow this site to be developed with large buildings, such as other sites are. The recommendation is that the ARC adopt the resolution approving the project with the conditions listed. And the conditions include the mitigation measures that were adopted as part of the initial environmental document, as well as the measures listed in the biological assessments in Exhibit B, and other requirements by the city that Chris mentioned as well. I'm available for questions, and the applicant is here as well.
Thanks, Fernanda. Do any of the committee members have questions for Fernanda?
I was just looking for a tree removal plan. I didn't see that in this presentation. Typically that's required, tree removal and size of trees and things like that. What you mentioned seems reasonable, but just wasn't seeing that.
I didn't include the tree removals in the map in the presentation, but it's in Exhibit A. If you want, I can find it and pull it up. Would that help?
I think I have it here. I just was having trouble finding it.
Okay.
Any other questions for Fernanda? Okay.
Fernanda,
Oh, go ahead.
I know sorry. Fernanda, I know on that area of Garden Road, there's quite a bit of off-street parking. I think we have, is it 19 over what's required?
There were 128 spaces proposed, and I believe, let me look in the report. 116 required, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, sorry, 109 required.
Okay, so 19 over then. If I'm doing my math right.
However, there is a condition, because 4 of the parking spaces are within the front yard setback, and one of our zoning ordinance requirements is that there are no parking spaces within the front yard setback. And so that was added as a condition of approval to eliminate those 4 spaces. So that would bring the parking count down to 124.
I do know that people park on the street and then to avoid paying parking fees for the airport. So I do know that there is quite a bit of competition for that area, that particular section right there closer to the airport. And a lot of long-term parking happens there. It's not supposed to. And there's often a City of Monterey meter people coming by and marking tires. But I did have a little concern about the number of parking. Knowing that parking, off-street parking is an issue down there.
Okay, why don't we move to the applicant? Do you have a presentation?
Hi, my name is Doug Roberts. I'm with JHW Architects. And please, I can get down the project today. I just wanted to point out.
Is the mic on? I can't hear.
Yeah, I can't hear either.
Okay, how about that? Can you hear me now? Okay,
Yes.
I'll start over. My name is Doug Roberts from JHW Architects. We're a longtime Monterey firm, and our office is actually on Garden Road, right in between the 2 projects you're looking at today. And so if I can just add a few more things to what Fernando was talking about, give a little more information, I think that might help. When we first were looking at this project, there was actually a consideration of reusing the existing buildings. It was determined that the existing buildings were difficult to make into apartments because of the odd shapes. And then 2, there was a limited amount of floor area available to actually get the kind of density that was allowed and get, a number of apartments to actually make it a more financially feasible project. So the decision was made that the existing buildings would be torn down and the new buildings built. At that point, our input from the city planning staff was to try to retain as much of that interior courtyard with all the big trees that are there as much as possible, and try to retain as much of the forested site as possible. Unfortunately, when our arborist went out, he was finding, as you'll see in the report, that almost all of the pine trees were in fair or poor or dead condition. There's a couple of smaller redwood trees that are up in the front setback that we're keeping, that are the only trees on site that he actually rated as being in good condition. So while we're retaining as many of the pines as we can, they are dying. They're going away over time. But we'll see what we can. We're trying to retain as many as we can. Let's see. The original it went through a couple of iterations in the last couple of years where we had a a few more buildings that morphed into a single larger building in the back of the site in order to put up to 98 units on the site. And because of water issues, the water was not able to become available to do that. So it pulled us back to the 57 units that are proposed today. We left those 5 buildings where they were because that's the most buildable part of the site. It's the most level part of the site. It's the easiest to get the accessibility issues addressed on the site, and so on. Let's see. There's of the 5 buildings, the 4 outer buildings are all what we're calling Building B, which is it's all the same floor plan. It's opposite on the other side of the site, but it's basically the same floor plan with 2 3-bedroom and 2 2-bedroom units on each floor. So they're family style apartments. And then the Building A has the common areas on the bottom floor, and then the upper floors are 1 and 2-bedroom units. And things. And the Building A becomes kind of the main entrance to the property with the porte cochere out front in the drop-off zone, and so on. Regarding the bonus incentives, the building height, I kind of doubt that anybody's going to dispute that the building height is any kind of a problem. The part that goes over 35 feet is part of the peak of the hip roof that's diminishing away from your view, and it's just, and the actual perceived height at the eave, the main lower eave is only like 28 feet above the first floor, and with a couple of small gables as it goes around to break up the facade. Those portions of the building tend to be well below the 35. It's just that last peak of the building is up higher. And as Fernanda mentioned, it's a simpler, more attractive roof construction, easier to maintain, and has some financial benefit to it also. Regarding the building distances, the zoning code is written so that if you have residential buildings that are on a site where the main entrance is either across from a main entrance of a building or a rear entrance of a building, that there needs to be 30 feet in between. In this case, due to the design of the buildings, it's the Building B's, it's kind of difficult to say what's really constituting a main entrance, because the 4 units are arranged around a center open corridor, and I don't know if it's possible to get the floor plan up on the screen. And so you enter just kind of the open passageway on either end of the building, and then go into the 4 units on that floor, or up a set of stairs to go into the 4 units on that floor off of this open corridor system that's in the middle. I think the code was probably written with the notion that you might have several townhouses or condominiums or something else where the front door, the main entrance to the building, or maybe even a single family home or something, main entrance to a building might be directly across from somebody else's door into their unit, across an open space, and they wanted to get 30 feet in between those kinds of conditions. In our case, we're talking about, if you can maybe go back 1 sheet to the, I'm sorry, go up a little more. Or I'm sorry, go to like the floor plan view. You're going up site, go. Yeah, the other way. Like that. Let's go down to the Building B floor plan, so this is I guess it's kind of complex to read because it's got a lot of construction document information on it, but you can kind of see the stairs in the middle of the building. There's an open passageway in the up and down to go through the middle of the building. And so you come into the building in that area, and then you can go into your unit to each side. If we consider that opening to that passageway the main or rear entrance, or the main entrance to the building, then the 30 feet issue is justified. If we say it's like a rear entrance, or not even really an entrance per se, it's just a way to get to the entrance to your unit, then the 30 feet kind of goes away, because the two rear entrances across from each other don't require that distance in the zoning code, and so on. So it really has to do with if we're calling the main entrance that's between the two building Bs a main, or the space that's between the two building Bs on each side of the site as a main entrance, is where the 30 feet thing comes from. I bring this up simply because I think there's an opportunity for the Architectural Review Committee, because I think there's some gray area in the definition of this in the code, to be able to actually say whether you believe that this is a main entrance and justifying the 30-foot necessity or not. And then if it's not, then that bonus incentive is not necessary, and the owner would not have as high of obligation for the type of affordable housing, regulated affordable housing, that needs to be put in this project. I think it's really up to you how you want to define it, but I just bring that up because I'm not sure that we can say that those are main entrances. Let's see. For the 57. Let's see. Oh, the tree survey was produced a couple of years ago, back when the project was in a slightly different form. And so you'll see on the tree plan, the tree removal plan, that there's actually the sixth building still shown, which had to do with how we were taking trees out and so on. There are some trees that are going to be able to be kept that are where that building footprint was, and other trees that are in a different condition now. There's actually one tree that was slated as dead that we're not having to remove because it's already fallen over, and so on. So in general, according to my count, there's 67 trees, I think, now that we're removing, retaining 60. But if we're probably, to be consistent with what we were talking about in the prior project, if there was a landscape plan that was produced, closer to the time of construction to address the final trees and landscaping and so on, that might be a more appropriate way to handle how we deal with all that. In the meantime, the general idea is that the tree removals that are requested in the application and are part of the arborist report are primarily because either it's in the way of a building, or parking or grading, or that it's already in really poor dead condition, and appropriate for removal anyway. And so we'd in general like to just keep that as the part of the application, and then if necessary update that as part of the landscape plan that would be submitted as part of the building package. Let's see. A question I'm sure is going to come up about water. Part of the justification for this project for water with the water district is that we'll have on-site gray water recycling to flush toilets. So in order to help maximize the number of units. I want to mention one other thing. The colors that are submitted on the renderings and stuff that, from the time that the drawing is rendered and then it goes through different iterations of people seeing it on different screens and how it gets projected and stuff, they're not terribly accurate. They're close. There is a darker greenish color that's on the facade that is actually a little grayer than, and I have color chips here if the staff, the committee that's here would like to see what those chips actually look like. But
You just hold them up, that'd be helpful.
I'm sorry, what?
If you could just hold them up and started doing that, that'd be helpful.
Hold them up?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can see them.
Let's see. I think we had, those are the main building colors. I don't know if you can see that.
Yep.
Yeah. And then there was a trim color. I think that was pretty accurate. That's just the real dark gray, but the darker greenish tone is actually a little grayer than all that. And then the white is a nice warm, nice warm white. But I think that probably would help clarify those. Let's see. And then those actual colors are named on the plan anyway, so we could always use that for reference. These are the actual color chips.
Thanks, Doug.
That concludes my presentation. If you have any questions.
Thanks, Doug. Do any of the committee members have questions for Doug?
I was just curious if any other iterations for the porte cochere were studied.
Yeah, the porte cochere, I think, is probably going to get fleshed out a little better as we do the CDs. The shape of the roof, I think, is something that we want to keep. How we handle the columns might have a little more detail to them. And then structural, that part of the proportion of that is, to get enough height that you could have a bus or something go underneath and things.
And I'm guessing, projecting, I guess, that it was determined that we don't get enough rain to have a covered connection to the building.
The units that are on the second floor there, in front of the porte cochere, I think we might start interfering with windows and things. There's also building code considerations about and I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but about the area of buildings, and then if we start adding to that, the porte cochere becomes part of that building. Structurally, it's always a little bit awkward to try to attach something like that. It's that big. You could do it with a separated structure and get it to come up closer. That's true, but yeah, there may be some opportunity there.
Last question, in the courtyard, it looks like on one of the plans there's a bit of a hardscape area. Is there consideration for picnic tables, gathering type space in that, or is it just paths? It kind of looks like it's just paths right now.
Well, we've laid out a number of paths because the requirement, according to the zoning code, is that to qualify as open space, that's a requirement in this zoning overlay district, that it has to have some use to it, and being able to walk on a path and get into that space more easily is part of that use. We spotted some benches around and the bollard lighting, and we have an area that we had originally identified with when the courtyard was completely enclosed as maybe a little tot lot that might have some it might have sandbox or some equipment or something. As we flesh out a design, a more landscape design, that that use may be able to move away from the buildings where it'd be less impactful to the residents that are, looking right out to that. But the grading on the lower part of the site has been done in a way that helps balance the cut and fill, as well as leave some area that's relatively flat that could be developed for some other kinds of outdoor use. The site right now is, I don't know if everybody's been there or not, but it's there was some purposeful landscaping at some point, but most of it is pretty natural underneath the pine, in that whole pine environment. And so I think a lot of it's going to get, probably up around the buildings, it'll get developed a little more, but I think the main concept is to leave a lot, especially where the pines are dropping all their needles and the oaks are going to be dropping all their leaves, that, you leave a lot of that pretty natural.
And I was trying to zoom in on some of these plans in that courtyard. Are those largely oaks or pine?
The court area is it's all pines there now. We were trying to get away from planting new pines because I think they're going to be we think that they're going to be a problem over time. So the other species that's on the site that is native are those oaks, and that matches a lot with the area to start propagating those kinds of oaks more on the site to help make it more forested that way.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, we'll move to any public questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Erica, could you
Sure.
please?
Once again, members of the public are encouraged to join our meetings via Zoom Gov, a secure service that connects you live with no lag time. To join the Zoom meeting from a computer or phone, use the link or phone numbers on the agenda posted at isearchmonterey.org. To join by telephone, dial 833-568-8864, then enter the webinar ID. Today's webinar ID is 161-914-9563. To provide public comment via Zoom, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. To provide comments by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute when called upon. Public commenters will be announced using their last 3 phone number digits or the name typed into Zoom. There's one attendee and their hand is not raised.
Thanks, Erica. Why don't we close public comment unless that person decides to join us later. Maybe we can listen to their comment. Otherwise, let's move to committee comments. Any comments from the committee?
I have a question for Fernanda. Changing the setbacks from 30 feet to 20 feet, I'm sure this has all been vetted, but that's okay with the fire department and fire codes, having the buildings, these are pretty tall buildings and that's pretty close together.
Yes, this wasn't a concern with the building department. We have a development review committee with city staff from all of our departments, and this wasn't raised as a concern.
Thank you. I'll just add that since we're in comments that I'm very familiar with this development. I think it's called the Trident, something like that. I used to bank there in the early 80s. And I always thought they were kind of, strange looking buildings, the shape and all that. But, a lot of businesses have been there over the decades. And I think this is a really good use moving forward. And so I'm glad that these guys are doing what they're doing.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I guess I'm going to weigh in here. I just think we're seeing another project where it appears there's very little thought given to the outdoor spaces. Some paths, some benches, and this one's different because it's not a series of studios, it's a series of bigger apartments, and there are going to be families out there probably. And I just, yeah, it's tough to see these projects coming through with, really very little attention being paid to site planning and outdoor spaces. I'm not a huge fan of one building mass that appears to have been replicated 4 times and sort of splayed across the site. I think it feels very institutional. I don't agree with staff's assessment that it's analogous to the Monterey style of architecture. I think there's more to the Monterey style of architecture than just tiles and stucco. The scale of these buildings is very different. The closeness of them, I just think it feels very massive and institutional. The lack of the ground floor apartments relating to the ground plane, again, all the entrances being internal, it just makes the exterior feel very banal to me. The lack of resolution on the porte cochere, the spindly columns, its awkward relationship with the building it's in front of without being attached, feels like it's very close. And again, the proportions of the building with those spindly columns, just these are, I just heard the comment several times that we'll flush this out in construction documents. And well, I mean, we're reviewing the project tonight. Not a huge fan of the color scheme. I think the colors are being used because there's a general lack of materiality on the buildings, and they're trying to cover that up with colors, much like the Marriott Hotel downtown is doing. And I don't know. I'm not a fan of this project for a lot of reasons. I appreciate the fact we're trying to get housing down here, and I just don't think this is the way to do it.
I appreciate Justin's comments. I don't disagree. I did hear a number of times, we're still working on this, but we are trying to review this as is, right? So if this porte cochere were to be improved, that would be nice to see. I do appreciate this kind of idea of a courtyard, but there isn't really anything there yet. And I did hear the applicant say, again, maybe we'd come back with a landscape plan. So that those 2 items in particular are I guess the areas I was focused on. But I don't disagree with the materiality comments that Justin said either. I'm not exactly sure how to proceed with that in particular. The density and closeness doesn't in particular concern me too much. I think there is a need to have some greater density, some exploration of ways of dealing with that. It should have a little bit better response to the ground plane and what's happening there. But otherwise, if we were looking at this just as sort of a massing study, I'd be okay with it, but I do have some concern over the porte cochere landscape plan and some of the material palette considerations.
I'd like to add that I agree with both Justin and Payam that having this proposed landscape plan as part of a final review process, I'd like to see us get things that are a little more fleshed out than that. And we've seen it in the past, and here's 2 projects that kind of have, well, we're going to, those trees are dead anyway, and we're going to protect these trees maybe, or we're going to follow the guidelines of the city and just have a little bit more, fleshed out process when it comes to landscaping. Is there going to be benches, picnic tables? What are they going to look like? How are they sourced? And what are the materials? Is it aggregate? Is it cement? Is it, pavers, that kind of thing. So, Yeah, I agree. I mean, I know that these projects, we don't want to hold up a project because we don't know what kind of bench we're going to put in, but it'd be nice to see a little bit more, thought put into these, the final degree of landscaping and outdoor use for sure.
Yeah, I mean, these are major projects. These are big projects.
Just to add to that, generally speaking, I mean, these are considered amenities, at least in my experience. It's something that a developer wants to do. So I'm kind of surprised to not see some thought go into that. It's usually a really strong selling point for people that are going to use these projects. And I mentioned it before, but in other cities I've worked with, it's required that it's a licensed landscape architect that works on the project. There's usually some requirement for the outdoor uses. So it would be, I just echo that again, that it'd be nice to see a little more attention to that and how that relates to the building layout as well. But again, this one does have some attention to that. There's a courtyard that could be really interesting. Preserving trees, pines are a little less interest to me, but just a little additional thought as to those uses would be great.
And I just want to react to committee member Ostabar's comments. I do not have a problem with the density. I think the manner in which architects tackle the issue of density is a major part of how we solve our housing crisis. I think this project could be pointed to by critics saying, well, this is not good density. I mean, I just think you have to be creative in how you approach that density. Taking one building mass and replicating 4 times and displaying it across the site doesn't feel like a creative approach to density to me. It almost feels like, an affordable housing project on a flat site in another part of the county that's sort of been picked up and dropped here. It doesn't present well to me.
Yeah, it's other affordable housing projects I've worked on do require actually the outdoor amenity spaces as part of the outdoor
in order to get their tax credits. Yeah.
Do it. So it is an interesting challenge kind of put in front of us with this project.
I think given where we are now, we could make the similar request for more detailed plans for the outdoor area, come back to the ARC. But I think the issues that Justin has mentioned would more or less require a full redo. So why don't we request somebody come up with a motion, maybe that continues to allow the applicant to move forward. I think as Justin mentioned, we really do need to have the affordable housing developed in Monterey, and I'm not sure if the analogy that this would not show that objective in the best of light really warrants denying it. So I guess, does anybody want to try to make a motion that moves forward, maybe with including the same condition that we did with the previous project?
I can give it a go since nobody's jumping on to do that. This is 2600 Garden Road, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And again, I think it's an improvement on what's there. I think we need more housing. This isn't my favorite project I've ever seen. I'm sure that replicating a building 4 times is more cost effective. And we're trying to make it all work for affordable housing's sake. So, all right. So
Patrick, before you make that, I just want to make one point.
Yeah.
This is not an affordable housing project. This is a market rate housing project with 20% affordable housing. Am I correct? on that?
I think you are correct.
Yeah. It's
Well,
it's
I
a
mean-
market rate. Yeah, the only
it's not
affordable
a-
housing in there is what's required by the city to meet their minimum threshold for approval. We keep calling it an affordable housing project. It's not an affordable housing project.
So, but it has 20% affordable.
It has 20% affordable housing.
Okay.
Just like the last one.
Just like the last one, right?
Yeah.
It's not a project. It's not 100% affordable.
It's a market rate housing project.
All right, well, here we go. I move to approve 2600 Garden Road Architectural Review Application ARP 20-0097 for preliminary final architectural review. 5 new 3-story multifamily residential buildings and accessory structures, tree removal application ART 22-0002, reasonable accommodation request to locate portico share within front yard setback. 2 density bonus law incentives for building height increase to 38 feet 8 inches, building spacing reduction to 20 feet. And yeah, I don't need to read the rest of that. And I think if you could help me, staff, with the condition is that the applicant is going to come back to the ARC with a completed outdoor site plan for landscaping, hardscapes, landscapes, maybe even, walkway materials, benches, tables, et cetera.
Can I follow up question with that? I mean, if we're asking them to come back with that much, as well as it sounds like maybe we're wanting them to come back with a more fleshed out portico share, perhaps materials for the building, what are we approving? Are we just approving the massing layout and height of the buildings, but they're actually coming back still with all these other things?
Well, I mean, I'm thinking it's everything but the landscaping. And they're giving us some landscaping, but it's a more fleshed out landscape plan than what they're giving us.
We can add extra conditions.
We can keep adding conditions, or I can pull the motion too. I mean,
Well, let me ask that then and put that out there to the committee. If they came back with improvements on the portico share, a materiality study of the building materials and a landscape study, would that, I guess I'm talking to Justin primarily, would that be an approvable approach? I know it's not ideal.
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, those should be bare minimum submittal requirements. I'm just confused on why we're continuing to see projects without those things. It
seems a little premature on the portico share.
This is like, to me, this feels like a concept review. And it's slightly more, but.
So let me just clarify. So this is application for preliminary and final architectural review. So you can, as a motion, you can separate preliminary from final. The preliminary is those first 3 findings, which talk about siting, mass, form, architectural style, view impacts, and consistency with general plan and other plans. Those first 3 findings are preliminary architectural review findings. The last one, the 4th one that talks about exterior materials, landscaping, lighting, etc., that one is the final architectural review finding. So if you want, you can separate them. You can just approve preliminary architectural review.
I think on this one, it's incumbent on us just to do preliminary on this and not give it final.
I agree.
Yeah, I just want to iterate that I agree with Justin and to a certain extent, I don't want to say frustration, but I think for us to make a full and final assessment or vote on this is that we need the detail of the information to base a reasonable and informed decision. So at least from my point of view, my comment is to go with preliminary and withhold final at this point.
Yeah, I can agree with that. So if we can just throw out my original motion, and I will move to approve 26 Garden Road architectural review application ARP-20-0097 for preliminary review. I guess I don't know what. So for preliminary plans, and I guess the conditions would be, to get final architectural review sign off, we need more details on landscaping. The porte cochere needs to be completely fleshed out with final concept drawings. And then I personally don't have any problem with the materials, the Spanish tile roofs and the stucco and the colors. But if you guys need to see more information with that, let me know.
So if we give preliminary approval, then do they come back for final?
You can ask them to come back to you for final or to come back to staff for a staff approval.
I think we need to clarify that too, Patrick.
Okay, yeah, no, they need to come back to the ARC for final approval with those conditions. And I'm not sure if that was clear or not. So it's basically landscape, a very fleshed out landscape site plan. What their final porte cochere is going to look like. Is it going to have these?
Well, Patrick, I don't think we need to, I'm sorry to interject. I don't think we need to clarify the things we need to see if we're just giving it preliminary. I think it goes back to what Fernando was saying, that we're just basically approving the mass of the building and the concept of we don't need to give them a laundry list of things we want to see.
Okay, like maybe that doesn't need to be in the motion, but just giving them a heads up on why we're not giving them final approval now. Yeah, that's obvious. So if that doesn't need to be in the motion, then I guess, again, I would move to approve 26 Garden Road, ARP 20-0097 for preliminary approval.
Can you clarify if what your motion is about the reasonable accommodation request and density bonus law incentive? And tree removal?
Okay, so this is a preliminary approval. It's not a final architecture review approval. So my motion would include approval of the tree removal application, the reasonable accommodation request to locate the porte cochere within the front yard setback, and the 2 density bonus law incentives for building height increase, the building spacing reduction 20 feet. And I think that was it. Is that correct, Fernanda? So we're signing off on that. We're signing off on everything except for final architecture review until we see a more fleshed out plan. Does that make sense?
Can I ask a question about the tree removal though? Because in the applicant's presentation, they stated that the arborist report in the application was based on a previous design. So the tree counts would be flushed out in construction documents. Is what's presented to staff on this application in terms of tree removal counts actually accurate?
So yes, so the tree assessment was prepared when an earlier version of the project was envisioned, but the tree removals required to make room for the 5 buildings are accurate. And then the tree removals required for demolition of the back building are also accurate.
But I thought they weren't going to remove those trees because they're not demolishing the back building, or I guess they are demolishing. Okay, it's not really clear to me, Justin. we could take the tree removal application out.
Well, so Fernanda, you're certain that the tree removal application is consistent with the plan, because I could have sworn I heard the applicant state that that wasn't the case.
He said
And
it was,
maybe I misheard that.
yeah, I think he said it was done previously. So some trees that were shown as not in good condition have actually fallen already. That was the only comment I think I heard. But I'd reiterate just with staff, if we can just clarify that they confirm that this is accurate with the current plan, then I'm fine with that.
So what I also understand from the applicant is that the difference is that some trees have died since the preparation of the tree assessment.
But the removal plan matches the current plan. Is that correct? If the applicant's still here, I guess they could answer that.
Fernanda, can we have the applicant answer
okay,
that question? Would you be kind enough to
Happy
interject?
to. Yeah, I'm sorry, I was not. Oh, is this on?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to address that. Let's see. There are some trees that have died in the meantime, and like that one tree that's actually fallen over that was already dead and slated for removal. So that there's a little bit of variation in the total count of trees to be removed versus the arborist's list that was provided a couple of years ago. So, but as Fernanda is pointing out, the tree removals that are necessary for the grading for the 5 buildings and so on are consistent with what he had identified, and that the small variation of a couple trees here and there that is not really significant. One of the things that I'll point out is that as with the current plan, where we don't have where the rear part of the site behind the 5 buildings is left open space rather than having a building there, as was earlier contemplated. We were also able to retain the actual existing parking lot in that whole area too. And so the trees that are around that parking lot, primarily south of the parking area, against the neighbor's property, that were in part slated for removal, several of those are now able to be retained and just left as is. So the big difference, I think you were saying there's 65 trees or something that were coming out. I think I'm counting 67. And but we have a net increase of trees that are being retained because of how that rear parking lot's being handled.
I for one don't quite understand that. It sounds like you're saying it is inaccurate that the current plan as shown.
It's not 100% accurate to what will probably eventually be done. And if I were to come back with a new plan tomorrow, by the time it actually be executed, it might still not be accurate. But if I came back with a new plan tomorrow, that would be more accurate than the arborist presentation that he has right at the moment. Because like you say, that's a couple of years old. But I think it's if it would be acceptable to provide a single plan that actually overlaid what the arborist plan has and then identify where the differences are, that might be a way to clarify that.
I think, I'm sorry, but I think that's required. I mean, I've never done a project where we're not held accountable for what we say is in the drawings and what the number of trees are. To hear you say that it might change in the future, et cetera, that's the point of this process, right? Is that there's accountability for what is put in front of this body.
Right, and I fully appreciate that. The actual site conditions and the conditions of the trees and the timing of how they're dying and so on. By the time the project is completed and occupied, it's likely that somebody's gonna have to call the forester and say, hey, we need to take this tree out too. Some of those things are gonna be happening. It's just kind of the reality of the situation. The other thing that might help with this is it sounds like you're moving towards wanting a more full landscape plan before we can go to final approval, and that more full landscape plan would identify all of that. So that may be a way to handle it too.
It sounds like that's where we're headed. So that we would remove approval of the tree removal plan.
Okay, I heard that. So yeah, so back to my motion. We're not gonna approve the tree removal application. As far as the port cochere setback, that stays, and the two density bonus law incentives for the building height and the building spacing reduction. Are you guys okay with those stand in this motion? I mean, we're not voting now. We're just coming up with a motion. All right. I'll kick this back to you, Bob.
Yeah. Erica, could you read back what you think, please?
Architectural review. And then there were conditions of approval. It sounds like the tree removal is the conditions. Are the conditions?
I can read it.
Okay.
So you're approving preliminary architectural review only, the reasonable accommodation requests, and the two density bonus law incentives.
Correct.
And final architectural review is required to be considered by ARC prior to building permit issuance.
Correct.
Great. Can we have anybody want to second that?
I'll second it.
Erica, could you do a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Chair Bluth,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hunter,
Aye.
Committee Member Carter. Aye. Committee Member Ostavar,
Aye.
Committee Member Polly.
No.
Okay. Committee Member Schmidt
Aye.
and Committee Member Tregenza.
Aye.
Okay, this motion carries with a vote of 6. The decision is appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 days. Applications are at the planning office or online.
Thank you. Fernanda, do you have any staff reports for us?
Yes. So there was an appeal application filed for the 2101 North Dumont Street Hotel project. And that was tabled at the December 21st, 2021 City Council meeting because the city is considering some of the issues that the applicant brought forward, or that the appellant brought forward. And then on the January 11th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting, this is also a Garden Road project. However, there was an addendum that needed to be approved to the mitigated negative declaration that was approved back in 2019. And that addendum was approved by the Planning Commission for the project at 2300 Garden Road. Just to be clear, this project 2300 Garden Road, it's also undergoing architectural review, and it will come forward at a later date. However, it couldn't be, basically the environmental review required an addendum to that negative declaration. The project wasn't eligible for a CEQA exemption. So that's why the planning commission had to consider an addendum. And so that happened on January 11th. And then the tentative agenda for the next ARC meeting on February 2nd is a presentation about objective design standards. So this is a state law that was passed actually back in 2018, I believe, or became law in late 2018 or early 2019. And these are state Senate Bills 9 and 35. And they require developments that contain an affordable housing component to undergo a objective design standard review, which means that objective design standards are standards that are numerical and that don't have any discretion tied to them. So if a project meets those standards, then there is no discretionary review required for those projects. So this is a state law that is aiming to streamline housing development.
Just a
So I'll
question.
be making that presentation at the next meeting.
I'll save my question for your presentation then.
Okay.
Thanks.
And then also on the agenda right now is 522 Larkin Street, our first ever second story ADU. So usually ADUs are only subject to a building permit, but we adopted an ordinance requiring ARC review for second story ADUs. First story ADUs just go through the building permit process, but second stories require ARC review.
Which was it? What was the address?
522 Larkin Street. And I know at the last meeting, one of you asked about when are ARC group field trips coming back. However, I do not have an answer for that. Just because of the state of the pandemic, we do not know when we can hold ARC field trips.
Thanks, Fernanda. I think also when I was talking to Kim Cole, she mentioned that our meetings are going to go virtual from now on.
Yeah.
So our next meeting will be all Zoom on, I think, the 3rd of February.
Yeah, the 2nd
or 2nd. So, well, thank you all. We'll adjourn the ARC meeting at 6:39. Thank you.